in the workplace, there's a lot of roadblocks that hinders your work performance.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have a really great topic for you today. It is about the cultural differences in divorce. I think you guys are going to find this very interesting, and it's what every HR professional needs to know. And I want to introduce our speaker today because I think that you're going to find her very, very interesting and that she brings a lot to the table. Let me tell you about Cindy Gunraj and why she's so important to this conversation today. She is the CEO and founder of Stillness Blooms and has successfully overcome many life transitions. Divorce was the catalyst for her major life shifts. Growing up, Cindy was immersed in a culture where women act as caretakers in the home, but are taught to suppress their voice and their desires. Cindy's time as a performer allowed her to develop her communication skills, which led to an awakening, a new voice and identity, and shedding the limited cultural beliefs that she had had. On her journey, working across multiple industries, global health, pharmaceutical, medical education, real estate, and yoga, she met many women who were struggling to listen to themselves in order to truly live a wholehearted and authentic life. This paved the way to a creation of Stillness Blooms, a safe space to help empower women to overcome their limiting beliefs. Cindy attained her BA in management and economics from Goucher College. She is a life coach, certified divorce coach, and an RYT, which is a yoga certified teacher. She is also a professional speaker who specializes in presentations, and her work has empowered hundreds of individuals. She's the author of 2 #1 best-selling books called Winning Your Parents' Approval for Divorce and Listen to Yourself. She's spoken at the United Nations, UNICEF, Dress for Success Worldwide, and Hewlett Packard. Cindy loves hiking, meditation, spending time with her partner, David, and her dog, Corgi, Joy. Welcome, Cindy. We're so grateful to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Vicki.
I'm so grateful. This is a really important conversation because I learned about the differences in cultural divorce. And I found it really fascinating because there are so many cultures around the world that simply don't experience divorce the way we do here in the United States. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your cultural background and your own divorce story?
Sure, Vicki. So for me, it was really, I grew up, I'm what you call West Indian. So I'm part of the Indian diaspora. And my mom is from Trinidad. That's where I was born. My dad is from Guyana, and our ancestors are from India. And my mom is one of 12 siblings. My dad is one of 13 siblings. So you have these beautiful cultures that with large groups of people, aunts, uncles, cousins. So you can imagine the size of the get-togethers. And the family functions, they were never ending. And in that you have beautiful food, a lot of beautiful traditions, spoken, unspoken. And that's the kind of background I grew up in. Very traditional. The women were usually the caretakers, stayed at home, ran the family. The men went to work. And that's the upbringing I had. And there was this cultural stigma when it came to divorce. If you're entering a marriage, it was one of commitment, and most of the time it was for economical reasons. The partnership they look at marriage. I'm going to say in Hinduism, because my mom was Hindu and my dad was Christian. So I got to experience both. And in my marriage, my partner was Hindu. So looking at Hindu, there were things where they looked at matching this thing called your horoscopes with the partner. So think of it as you're looking at the birth chart and the profiles, and are these two people going to be a match? And the parents are coordinating the wedding details and such. And most of the time the bride and the groom just shows up for the day. So it's very traditional. It's one of the oldest cultures. And so a lot of this is ingrained in us from young. Uh, and so when I went through my divorce, Vicky, it was a real awakening because my parents were very upset and very disappointed that this was transpiring, because to them, they invested in the marriage. They had dreams and hopes in the marriage, and that was going to, be broken as well. So it was, I could see why they were upset, and their parents raised them to think of marriage in a very traditional way, and to come from a place of honoring your commitments, regardless of situations and changes and what life may bring you. Which there's beauty in that, but there's also, a part, if something is not working, it that needs to be honored and looked at too, right? So my background, and I found myself, I was in a high conflict divorce in New York, and I was dealing with the cultural backlash of that. And then I was dealing with a partner who, it made the process very acrimonious. So it was a very trying time for me, but it was a time where I learned to develop my own voice and start to pull away from the collective thinking, if you will, and start to see what was important to me, because going forward in the future, it would be just me.
Right. Let me ask you, what was the difference? What would be the difference in the way you experience divorce as Hindu versus a traditional American divorce?
Right. Great question. So, for me, I would say decisions were being made in a collective standpoint. So I was seeking the approval of my parents and the direction for the of what decisions, how to make the decisions. So when I couldn't get to the approval of the divorce, then, one has to step back and see, where do you go from here? And then also I was getting advice, Vicky, from other elders, from cousins, from people that were in my extended family that all had their points of views. And so it's taking in all that information, whereas I think in a traditional let's say American marriage, you wouldn't have to think so much of the collective opinions and points of views and seek approval in that way.
So you literally had to get the approval, or whether, not necessarily legally, but the pressure there is to get the approval from parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, that sort of thing?
Yes, because if I take you back from young, we are raised to think about life decisions. It's through seeking advice from elders. So things of who to marry, where to live, what house to buy, what to study. All these decisions, important decisions, are you go to your family, your parents, elders in your culture for advice. So
yeah,
when the marriage is starting to break down, you would naturally go to seek advice there. And so that's where I felt a real awakening of my own identity.
Interesting. And so let me ask you, because we want to do this, we're talking about cultural divorce in the workplace. So how does this impact somebody's work performance? All of these kinds of things these hoops that they have to jump through.
Right. I went through my divorce when I was in the work arena. I was working in pharmaceutical medical education at the time. And when you go to work, you're expected to give 100%. You're expected to be present and, show up to get projects done in a timely manner, right? So now if you're experiencing chaos in the household and then with your family members, and could be elders, could be even religious, like pundits and things like that. If you're experiencing some conflict with groups of people, and you've got to be expected to come in the work arena and give 100%, it's not going to happen,
right?
Because of the tremendous stress. And I'll take it a step further. When you're under stress like that, you're immediately put in your fight, flight, freeze. So all your problem solving skills are out the door. Your ability to communicate decreases. And as researcher Brene Brown talks about, you've got to be able to be vulnerable in order to tap into your creativity and your imagination. So if you can't be vulnerable and share what's going on in the workplace, there's a lot of roadblocks that hinders your work performance.
Do you think that it's something that you don't share in the workplace? Is that also a part of that Hindu culture?
That's a great question, Vicki. That one of the unspoken rules that we grew up with, at least I'll speak for my upbringing, is family came first. So, you would go, if you had problems, you come to your family first. And so there was this thinking of it's best to seek advice and counsel from family rather than outside groups of folks. Yeah. So naturally, if that's the case, you wouldn't go into the work arena sharing your heart. So
right. It's not something that you do. So how do you go into HR to say, hey, I need some support? That's really, so how does a divorce coach help in this process, do you think?
Sure. A divorce coach can help by, especially if you've been in the person's shoes with the cultural nuances like I have, immediately you have an understanding of what the level of stress the person is under and the entanglements of the people in this process, right? Because when they're making a decision, it's not just a decision for them. They're thinking about their parents and their soon to be ex-laws and, so many parts at play. So a divorce coach can help the person to just start to separate their emotions from their actual decisions. Mm-hmm. So then they can make the decisions from a grounded place, but most importantly, they can start seeing what is the right decision for them versus what everybody else is asking of them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So their family assumes that they are more of the decision maker. So a divorce coach helps you either make that decision of whether you want to continue that same tradition, or maybe you want to break free of those traditions, depending upon, how you see your life and your future, right?
And I would even say it's not so much a divorce coach making the decision for the person, but it's more so allowing the person to get the mental breathing space so they can arrive to a decision that is coming from them without someone else's agenda.
Right. What is the biggest challenge, do you think, that somebody in that Southeast Asian culture has with being open about this in their workplace? Is there a way that you can think that some things that an HR manager can say that could make it an easier way for them to open up and not betraying their culture?
Sure. I think if there was some sort of resource there, first of all, like, I was talking to some past clients about this when they were going through their divorce in the work arena, and they would have liked to see maybe a talk or a seminar or something in the workplace. Like, how they have seminars for retirement?
Yes.
And that's a life change. Right. So divorce is a life change. So some of my past clients have said they would have wanted to see some sort of seminar given in a group setting where, there was also some sort of lightheartedness, some stories infused in the program. So it wouldn't be so intimidating, so that was that's one of the things that I can share, is if the HR can start looking at programs to offer their employees.
Oh, that's awesome, because we're going to be doing that and have a whole library of these things for our clients to use. So I think that that's an absolutely brilliant recommendation. But what else do you think that an HR manager or supervisor can do to help these families?
Yes, and the other thing too is I want to share is the person, even though they may not, they may be going through this divorce or contemplating divorce, maybe some of their close team members may know, because of things like, if their spouse is not attending events, or if they're not hosting an event at their house, so it really becomes part. It can be, the stress can show up in the workplace, in those forms. And so the point I'm making, Vicki, is why the person could be more open to programs there, because they know, employees, their coworkers may know what's going on too. But another thing is if HR can offer some one-on-one support and other divorce resources for the person as they go through the transition, so they can have that personalized help in the transition.
Love that. Love that. And how do you feel? I mean, I know that we've been talking about the Indian cultures. How do you feel that HR, what should HR know about the cultural issues? How can they get that kind of understanding? Obviously, we're going to be doing that as well, but.
Yes, I feel starting to understand the richness and history of the culture, one example is, in India, 85% of the marriages are arranged. So, and there's a lot of nuances that goes into that. And so it's starting to understand that, what the person could be going through as they're transitioning. They could be going through the cultural pressure. They could be going through, the communications, the being unable to communicate to their parents or to their elders because they've never really exercised that skill in a way where they're not agreeing with the culture. Right.
Yeah. It's intimidating too, I think, to break away from that.
It is. At first it is because, it's seen as a threat, and it's seen as, you may be portrayed as being difficult or selfish.
Betraying the culture, right? You're betraying your heritage.
Yes, because there's a lot of things that goes on. Like, for example, parents typically, they don't go into, nursing homes. In our culture, they live with one of their children, one of their adult children, or they may, split it up, if they have a couple of kids. But the point is, they're vested, they're vested for the long haul. So, right.
And let me ask you, is in the Hindu culture, the Indian culture, are these arranged marriages consider religious marriages?
Yes, because, this is a Hindu customs, and in Hindu customs, they have certain criteria that they follow for a matching of a couple.
Interesting. And you had mentioned earlier that they literally use the zodiac to choose partners. a thing that they,
the horoscopes and the placement of each partner's birth, and then there's other criteria, and there needs to be a certain matching for it for it to be a successful marriage.
I find this so interesting and fascinating. Cindy, thank you so, so much. Now, I know you've written a book, and why don't you tell, if you want to hold that up and just tell everybody how they can get in touch with you, find your book, because I think it's really fascinating.
Sure. So my book is called Winning Your Parents' Approval for Divorce: 7 Practices to Leave Your Marriage with Their Blessing. And it's talks about facing cultural issues and the divorce process in a nutshell. And it gives, it's written like a love letter to an individual that is going through such a trying time, what 7 steps they can take to overcome this without damaging their relationship with the culture, but at the same time balancing their needs with the needs of the culture.
Right. And it's so interesting, because I had heard that there are other Asian cultures that also need parents' approval. And oftentimes family law attorneys are actually negotiating and doing the appointment setting and the conversations with the parents first, which I find very, very interesting.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's very important for everybody to understand that every divorce, we've always tried, every divorce is different. It has its own unique thumbprint. But then when you start to bring in other cultures and expectations around divorce and marriage, it's really, really fascinating. And we did one of these on religious divorces, which is why I asked, which is also very, very fascinating. Because if you don't understand the stressors and that these people are going on, it's very hard to assist them. So understanding it is definitely an important part. So we want to add your book to our library when we set up our Divorce Buddy mentorship programs. We want to include your book and to help them develop a library for their employees that are from different cultures. So thank you for that, Cindy. We appreciate you today. And lastly, before we say goodbye, how can they reach you?
Folks can find me on my website, stillnessblooms.com.
I love it. It's a wonderful thing. And honestly, what you're doing is so important to those companies that have employees, H-1B visa holders, or just employees that have, been here that grew up in other cultures that we don't necessarily have a familiarity with, but it's important that we help them through this process in the best way we can. So Cindy, thank you so much for being here. And we look forward to having everybody else join us. And we hope that you found this useful. And if you do, just